Hello, my name is Zach, and I'm the producer of the Schelling Point. And today is episode 0, and today with me we have Bertrand Chen. So Bertrand, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. My name is Bertrand Chen. I'm the CEO of the Global Shipping Business Network, GSBN. We are a not-for-profit blockchain consortium to drive digitalization of the shipping industry.
Since we're here today to talk about the Schelling Point, why are we starting a podcast?
Yeah, so I think going back, I have been a huge fan of podcasts for a long time. So I think as far as I can remember, maybe 10 years ago, the first podcast I really fallen in love with the medium was Serial about true crime.
Okay.
And then since then, I think podcasts evolved so much. I think even podcasts now are so important these days that some claims that that's the reason you had some change in the election, like the US election being followed by podcasts. But personally, what I found really interesting is not just for entertainment, it's also for learning. And my feed, for instance, right now, I watch something called Asianometry. I watch also something called Veritasium, very geeky, very science-based kind of feed. But also I watch 3 Brew and 1 Brown, which is about math. So I guess my feed is not the general feed of people.
I think that is a completely different feed from mine. I mean, before I joined, I think my feed was mainly just true crime.
Okay.
And then there was a little finance just for my own interest.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's already a lot of content on shipping, trade.
You would think so. Actually, trade is really important, right? And I think recently what I found personally, right, just browsing, there's one channel I think is quite popular, and that's mostly after COVID, which is called What's Going On with Shipping,
Okay.
by this mariner, American guy, which is really entertaining, and he plays with Lego and explain when the Evergreen got stuck in the kind of Suez Canal, what happened, etc. But it's very focused purely on the maritime.
Right.
Like the Mariner. There's another channel which is pretty cool by a guy who actually works for OCL, a Mariner. I think his handle is Jeff Hong Kong. And he does time lapse where he's on the container ship from, I don't know, Shanghai to LA, and then he's bored, he has nothing to do, just film stuff. And it's actually quite interesting to watch when the container ship goes to the storm. But my feeling is there's a lack of consistent content, and it's most of the content you can find is very specific to either the shipping industry, but don't cover all the area. And for me, when we look at the thing that we're working on today, right, trade digitalization, actually there's so much other area we have to touch, not just shipping. So example is economics, finance, sometimes even geopolitics, standards. There's so many concepts, and then there's a lack of sort of a one-stop shop where you can find everything that you want to learn about what's going on for the digitalization of shipping, of trade. Right?
Okay. So I hear digitalization and trade a lot. Is that the goal of the podcast?
Well, I think for the podcast, the main thing that we want to do is to create a kind of a movement, right? Because I don't think it's very clear that it cannot be done by a single person. It's almost impossible that even if GSBN really successful, we cannot do that alone. We have to work with partners and create movements. And also, fundamentally is people, right? It's not organization driven, it's people. And it's not the CEOs who are, I mean, I'm the CEO, but the CEO is not the one doing the actual work. The people, the middle management, and the frontline, they're doing the actual work. So really, I think what's needed to create this movement is a place, in my mind, where everyone can meet. You have the frontline, the mid-management, the senior people, and to share, to learn, and to work together. So that's really, I think, ultimately the goal of the podcast. We also think the podcast is really good medium to tell stories, because it's not like reading a PDF from a consulting firm, the strategy, this is what you need to do. In my opinion, that's pretty useless, because people say, oh, that sounds good, but in reality, when I do it, it's very different. And as human beings, we function more by telling stories and listening to stories. That's actually much more impactful. So I think that is really the goal of the Schelling Point.
Oh, interesting. I mean, from what we have worked on so far, stories seems to have been a common thread with all of the guests that we have interviewed and we are going to interview. Can you give us a taste? What are some of the topics we will touch on, and what are you most excited about?
Yeah, so for the topics, I think it's very varied, right? So based on my background, I care a lot about finance, because I think finance incentive drives everything. So trade finance, one subject we're going to touch on. There's other things like decarbonization we touch on. We also focus on maybe container shipping, especially from the perspective of sales, because people all know trade is very important. Sorry, shipping is very important for trade. but people don't really know how shipping actually works, right? It's not actually the massive ship that I think they matter, but it's really how does the shipping and help businesses solve their problem of logistics. And then I think the best people to talk to are the people who are the salespeople who talk to the
So the front
customer,
line.
the front line, exactly,
Right.
the salespeople. And then also maybe to understand the economics and then the history of container shipping. Why do we have today 8 or 10 top shipping line who covers 80% of the market? Why the market is like this? And to understand that, that also help us understand how potentially this industry can change. So I think those are all the key aspects that we want to talk to. But at the same time, don't necessarily want to restrict ourselves to only these topics, right? And I think as we talk to more people, maybe new subject will come up. And also, I really want this podcast to be a collaboration effort with the viewer, the audience. So if in the audience anyone feel this content not super interesting, less of it. This content very interesting, more of it, or even some guests that they want to talk to.
Oh, I think that's very interesting. I mean, personally, when we were preparing for the podcast, the one that I'm most excited about is actually decarbonization, because it's really driving how the world is going to change in trade, but also from an environmental perspective. So there's a lot of topics that we're going to cover, and I think a lot of them are very exciting to me. So how are we going to stand out in this podcast?
Yeah, I think that's the big issue, right? So I think when we start to design the thing, I won't say worry, but there's so much good content out there, right? Like, are we gonna just shout in the ether and nobody's gonna watch the thing, right? So, and I think I agree with you. I think the hardest thing is to figure out what's the unique thing we can bring. How do we stand out? So my thinking right now, and again, thing may change as we do more episode. First, foremost, I think we need to focus on people. Right. It's all about the people who can tell a good story, what's happening. And also, what's super interesting, I've found actually over the last 4 years running GSBN is there's so many different people from different career background who somehow end up in shipping. Just understanding career path, how they end up shipping, I think that's super interesting already, including myself, right? So I was in finance for 10 years and how the hell did I end up shipping? And I think a lot of people, once they end up shipping, they kind of never leave. I don't know, it's like Hotel California, once you're there, you don't leave. The second thing I think what I really want to do is I think we want to go in depth.
Okay.
I feel there's a lot of content out there which is probably more scripted and then how should I put it, talking point based, where you want to control what you want to say and then you just go, you hit the talking point, the 3 talking point, 20 minutes you're done. That's really the antithesis of what we want to do here, right? We want to go in depth, give the guest a chance to talk in detail what they want, and also we ask more questions, right? Because the goal is we also want to learn, want to understand what they're saying. So it's not just let's hit all the talking point and we're done. And that's why potentially the length could be a variable. Some guess if it's very interesting, maybe it's like, I think so far the longest we've done is 3 hours, right? So that's not, we're not going to, we're not trying to do Joe Rogan, right? So we're not going to have a 3 hours episode, but we don't restrict ourselves to only 20 minutes, right? So if the content is quality and the concept are interesting, we want to spend more time. And then the last thing, which I think is very important, right? We're not doing episode for the sake of doing episode. The goal also somehow is we need to find what's connecting everything. So we don't want to just talk to some random person who has some interesting idea, something to talk about trade. It somehow has to go back to digitalization, either from a point of view that it would impact the incentive, or it's something that it's interesting, people need to be aware. That I think is the true value of this podcast potentially, because trade is so complicated, so fragmented. It's very hard to find one place where you can potentially touch on all the different subjects that matters. And that's also to some degree the thing that connects everyone in this industry.
So it almost sounds like to me that we're trying to understand the rationale, the story of each individual, and how did they arrive at a particular subject area in trade or in digitalization, and how their unique insights or their experience in this area can contribute overall to the industry.
Yeah, I feel at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is I think everyone has some secrets that they know about how to actually do the industry, and the goal is to extract from those really smart and interesting guests what's their unique secret about how we can drive the industry, right? And as a whole, the more people know about those secrets, I think the more interesting the industry becomes, and we can achieve greater things.
Agreed. So I guess there's one more question that a lot of our guests ask, and even we ourselves have a lot of questions on, is why is the podcast called The Schelling Point?
Okay, you never let me forget about this. Okay, sure. So for the audience, okay, so when we were coming up with a name for the podcast, I think it was a big struggle because the debate is, do we want to come up with a name that stand out? Personally, I'm a big fan of game theory.
Okay.
And the Schelling Point, really, the origin is coming from an American economist called Thomas Schelling. And in game theory, Schelling Point is a concept. It's also known as a focal point. And the idea is a natural solution that occurs in a game where the player cannot communicate.
Can you give us an example?
So let's say we have to meet in New York City, right, at noon tomorrow, but we cannot communicate. We cannot agree on location. So normal sharing point could be Grand Central, like in front of the clock. I like that. Or if you like rom-com, it could be top of Empire State Building.
Empire State, yeah.
Or it's Central Park, like the fountain in Central Park. Whatever. So those points occur naturally, and it just appears in some games. This thing occur naturally. So why I was inspired by this concept? I think Schelling Point is something that's very unique that applies to this industry. So to some degree, you can think the way you can think about it is back in the days, right, when first containerization really drive the growth. Container was a Schelling Point. Why is that? The insight, I think, of Malcolm McLean to drive containerization was nobody cares about ships, nobody cares about the terminal, nobody cares about train and track. All the customer care is how do I move my cargo from point A to point B in a cheap, reliable, consistent manner, right? That's what I care. And therefore, all those folks, the shipping line, the terminal operator, the trucker, the rail operator, they need to think from the point of the customer. And the Schelling Point in that transformation was the container, right? We meet at the container. So similarly, I think right now there's a lot of challenge for global trade. Trade has to digitize, has to transform. We need a new Schelling Point, right? It's not the container, it's something else. We don't know where it is, right? And my hope is the Schelling Point for this transformation is about ideas. And this podcast hopefully could be the place where people who want to drive change will meet, exchange ideas, learn, and grow together. So that's the hope, that's the aim for the podcast.
I see. Well, I hope that explanation helps clarify all the questions that our guests and our audience might have. For the record, none of the guests we have interviewed so far know what the Schelling Point is, including a historian and economist.
That was my biggest disappointment, to be honest. I thought he would know, but anyway. Yes, so I took the criticism, so that's why also I think I went back and used AI to come up with a subtitle to make it slightly less, how should I say, obscure or niche. So I think right now the new title with subtitle actually is the Schelling Point where ideas meet. So hopefully this is more self-explanatory what we're trying to do.
So we're still sticking with the Schelling Point.
Yes, we're not changing. We stick with this one.
All right, thank you, Bertrand. Thank you for your time today, and we will meet all the audience in episode 1. See you soon. Please like, subscribe, and comment.